The new Netflix show Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story, which tells the story of the infamously Milwaukee cannibal serial killer, is both sad and thorough. The show tells about the life and crimes of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Evan Peters plays the lead role. Even though the show doesn't shy away from the gory details, it leaves out some things about Dahmer's childhood, his crimes, and what was in his famous apartment. When Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, was turned into a movie, some details about Dahmer's crimes were left out. Real-life events had to be shown, but some details left out give us more information about the cannibal killer. In today's video, we will tell you about 5 things that Netflix is hiding about Jeffrey Dahmer. Before we start discussing in detail, please subscribe our channel and also press the bell icon as well. Number 1. Glenda Cleveland didn't really live in the Oxford apartments or ever meet Jeffrey. Glenda Cleveland, who is played by Niecy Nash, did not live in the Oxford apartments, despite what the show shows. She lived in a building next to the Oxford block that was not the Oxford block. Pamela Bass did live in the Oxford apartments and talked to Dahmer, and Nash's character is a better representation of her. She, on the other hand, thought he was nice and friendly, and she even took and ate a sandwich from him because she didn't think anything was wrong, though she says she has thought about this encounter every day now. Conrec synthesophone was also not found by Cleveland. Nicole Childress, who is Glenda's niece, was the one who saw a bloodied and bruised Conrec running from the building. As she says in this interview, while she was waiting for the police, Dahmer came up to her. When the police showed up, they didn't ask Childress anything about what had happened. Instead, they focused on Dahmer. Childress went to get Cleveland while they were asking questions, but when they got back, everyone was gone. We know that Dahmer killed Conrec not long after this terrible event. Number 2. Lionel Dahmer did not teach Jeffrey how to dissect roadkill. In the movie Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, a lot of time is spent showing how Jeffrey and his father, Lionel Dahmer, got along. The show gives the impression that Jeffrey's early interest in dissecting roadkill came from Lionel, who pushed him to do it and even showed his son how to do it. Lionel writes in his book, A Father's Story, that he did teach his son how to preserve animal bones. Jeffrey was interested in chemistry and biology, and Lionel had a PhD in chemistry. He didn't show him how to do anything, though, and he never helped him cut up roadkill. Number 3. Jeffrey's real neighbors were not overly suspicious of him. As was already said, Pamela Bass was Dahmer's neighbor who lived in the same building. She and Dahmer talked to each other. In a documentary called The Dahmer Files, she said that he was kind of friendly but kind of shy. She also remembered seeing him take a trash bag outside, which now makes her feel uneasy. She also said that she sometimes had a beer at Dahmer's house and didn't think anything was wrong because he was always willing to share. Bass says that the only thing he heard coming from Dahmer's apartment was music. In a news interview at the time, another neighbor said, "He seemed like a nerd to me." What I mean by that is that he kept to himself and did strange things, but not as strange as you might think. Some reports say that Dahmer's neighbors didn't complain that his apartment smelled like dead bodies. Instead, they thought it smelled like urine, which, while not very clean, didn't seem like a big deal. Number 4. The true brutality of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes. Dahmer started drugging his victims because he didn't like when they moved around during sex and wanted to see them as things. Dahmer tried to make a loving love slave out of one of his victims by making them unable to move. Errol Lindsay was Dahmer's 11th victim, and it was on him that he first used what he called his drilling technique. After giving his victims drugs and raping them, Dahmer drilled a hole in their heads and injected them with a mixture of acid and hot water in the frontal lobe. Some people were able to get through it, but Dahmer would still kill them later. During the show, Jeffrey calls Lindsay's family and tells them to stop looking for him. In real life, Dahmer made calls like this to the families of many of the people he killed. Tony Hughes, a deaf-aspiring model who was the next person Dahmer killed, was the second person he used his drilling technique on. He was shown in episode 6, Silenced. When Conrad Synthesomphone 14 was brought back to Dahmer's house, police officers quickly checked his apartment. When they did, they found Hughes' dead body lying on the floor. Hughes's foot was briefly seen in episode 2, Please Don't Go, which was about Synthesomphone's sad death. Number 5. Jeffrey Dahmer's House of Horrors. Many of the true crime shows on Netflix, like I Just Killed My Dad, have a lot of gory details. But the long list of body parts that were taken from Dahmer's house was especially horrible. Monster. The Jeffrey Dahmer story, by the way, used real news archive footage that showed the removal of human remains to show what happened. The hazardous materials team did this, but they were not police officers. Instead, they were a company hired from the outside. The men who famously carried the blue barrel down the stairs were only 18 years old at the time. This is proof that Dahmer's actions caused more pain in his community. Inside Dahmer's apartment, police found an altar he was making for himself. He said he was doing it so he could feel at home. 2 full skeletons were used to crack the skulls of 7 of Dahmer's victims. He planned to put these skulls across the table where he took pictures of their bodies. Dahmer wanted to add the heads of the 4 people whose heads had been cut off and were found in his refrigerator when he was caught. Dahmer was looking for a total of 12 skulls, but he only had 11 so far from his 17 victims. He says regular Evan Peters is no stranger to tragic, brutal roles. The worst part of Jeffrey Dahmer's story is that it could have been stopped. After he was charged with sexual assault, Dahmer was given a parole officer who was supposed to check on him twice a month, but never did. On the night Synthesomphone was given back to Dahmer, other emergency services were there and thought he needed medical help. But the Milwaukee Police Department told them they were wrong. Many of the terrible things that happened after could have been stopped. Monster. The Jeffrey Dahmer story is a brutal and detailed story of Jeffrey Dahmer's life and crimes. It also tells the stories of his victims and their families with care. Because Murphy wanted to focus on victims and survivors, these parts were left out of the adaptation. However, in Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, their inclusion shows more of Dahmer's terrible story. So that's it for today. Do you know any more things that Netflix is hiding about Jeffrey Dahmer? Share your views in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos. Thanks for watching.